but not quite.
Check the outside.
Inspired across the wall in orderly fashion, columns of four, suspended on a single nail each. Each one with combinations of colors, some are opposite, some are complementary but never the same spectrum or group. Combination of 2s and 3, each one on its own design. While it's built on the floor in orderly fashion, it begins to rise up into structure, resembling columns of different colors and height. Pillars supporting each column, in shape of different height they connect. Singular lines stopping it from falling while being suspended a foot from the floor. Geometric shapes layered on top of each other. Different contours display themselves, depending on which angle it is observed from. Nonetheless, still stays true to the four-line formation each shape is constructed on. The whole thing is textured with layers and layers of wool, making it soft to the touch. As the sharp corners protrude and escape the wool, so that it has no leverage to hold on. Round, round it goes, around the light of the wood, round its corners, softening their harshness, endlessly intermingling with colors, endlessly bringing out the action of the other.
There are three objects comprising this piece. They are placed on long metallic screws on a long wooden board and have equal space between them. Imagine grey clay being squished in your face and taking your hand's shape. Each one is different from the other, as the hand movement, pressure and gesture was different from the making of each one. Even though each piece has its own shape, none of them have a straight line. They're all covered in dark red silicone rubber. The one on the right has squished it and pulled with nails thick in the grey clay, so that it has 4 holes. On its back side is a clear view of inner palm lines imprinted on the clay. It is smooth and curvy on the top, and almost split into 2 parts on the bottom, and forms a small abstract semicircle line. On its front, the smooth textured red silicone, and on its back, has been peeled off and sinks out to view the clay beneath. More clay was used in its making, so it's more bulky, and the imprint on the hand is more obviously spotted. There was a lot of pressure applied on the clay, so the clay between the fingers is protruding and forming lines across the piece. In contrast to the first object, there are not holes, just 4 indents. Its front side is covered with dark red silicone, and on its back, it has been finely removed, and the clay underneath is being exposed. The third one is double in weight from the rest and placed horizontally on 1 screw on each side. There are 2 hands used to form this clay object. The one on its upper half was made by squishing it with the palm facing up, whereas the lower part was made of squishing the clay with the palm facing down. The silicone covering this piece is not being manipulated, cut, or ripped off, and is covered from top to bottom, all the way down the screw, and while it was being made, the silicone was dripping on the wooden board.
So, hi! We're a publication called Play Proper Creations. So basically, our publication consists of 3 versions style. The first original, which includes the vinyl alongside a big booklet that accompanies the vinyl. Another one is a CD with a tiny little booklet. So it's like a little copy of the big one. alongside that, it lives online with an archive of drawings, which didn't make it into the booklet, but basically every day we're adding more and more. So it's like an ongoing thing. Well, I don't know. I guess we have to explain what our publication is about. Our publication is about is basically this investigation into perception, into audible and so visual perception from us, what we perceived and what we describe to you. So it's different stages of how people perceive things. So how we perceived it, then we told it to you, and then how the person who drew it perceived it from the original artwork that already exists. So each description is describing a thing that actually exists. So there's different stages to a piece. So we were very interested in the idea of the original. What is the original? Is the artwork original? Is the what we're describing, the MP3 itself, original? Or is the original, or is the what you made, what you drew, is the original, depending on how you see it, basically. What we would like you to, if you so will, sit down and listen to them and draw your own interpretations of what we're describing. Well, there's like pens and things like that. And there's paper and ink, pens. If you're so inclined to. We're not forcing anybody.
There's like there's 6 different snippets of talking, and each one is a different image, so it's a different artwork. We're describing after each.
Yeah,
And that's what all these really bad looking drawings are. It's other people's interpretations of our description.
Yeah, we're going to show you later on the actual images of
yeah,
the...
in the end.
And is it for us to experience it, kind of?
Yes,
The idea of the
idea.
process. So could the original be the process as well?
It could be the process, it could be your drawing, it could be the description, it could be the original artwork, it could be the video.
We like it as a
good to
beauty,
experience it.
Yes. And it's sort of interesting to actually try it out, because when people listen to it the first time, they were like reluctant to do it, and when they actually tried it out, it's turned out quite fun and quite interesting, just to see how you perceive audible description.
And so I'm surprised how your drawing in relation to the original artwork work. Because sometimes
How different or how similar it is. Because sometimes it's very, very different, and sometimes it's like right on a bang, which is quite strange. Because we specifically try to avoid like the most obvious description of the artwork. Not to make it harder for you, but not to give away the artwork.
Yeah, how did you choose the original? We'll discuss that.
Basically, what we did is we pick one artwork from our own
Practice?
yeah. So whichever we liked the most. So like, for instance, I picked one that I thought like sort of represented quite a bit of my practice.
So would anyone drawing you have known your practice beforehand?
No.
Okay, so you avoided doing sort of famous people
Yes.
as well?
Yeah. So
For
it's
example.
basically just
So you didn't describe Mona Lisa and something like
no.
that?
People
Yeah.
have seen it, but the people who we collected material from before the presentation didn't.
So majority of people, yeah, they don't know what it looks like. And I mean, I'm sure some of them, some of you will know what the artwork looks like, but you
But
might not
hopefully from the way we described it, you won't know.
be able to
straight away.
guess
Which
which
one
one
is
it is. Because even like, we knew, but when we listened back to it, it didn't mean that we actually could even picture the original artwork in our heads. So yes, if you'd like, it'd be very nice if you could sit down and draw.
Being brave, you have really big bit of paper.
Yeah, like giant paper.
They were feeling really expressive. Yeah.
Big paper. Here you go, big paper. You can have more than one.
If you need more space, you can push the chair away.
If you like more space,
Anything else we can do, or do you want to write like a number of which type can be heard?
That leads to part of the drum. Lean around an opening lined with a few white dots that curve slightly. Two large and two smaller diameter. The lower pair are tilted outward, while the upper are parallel and upright. Sandwiched in between is a small protrusion, a highlight at the end that gives away its depth. Dark block colour falls around the horizon. Then towards the bottom, whereby it curls and separates, a light peachy colour expands and two arms fall down either side of the block. These protrusions form a well-framed shape, inviting you forward. Each extension ends with smaller jointed sausages bent and shaped into angles. One of them is tighter or confined angles than the other. The light peachy colour finishes abruptly. Dark blue takes over and continues down, separating into two strips. One falls behind the other, finishing with a light blue tip that perches on the floor, facing forward. The figure has smooth curves and appears in white space over a dark floor. The size of the title is irrelevant. It is unconfined, while the imagery is incredibly clear and controlled.
The industrial.
If you guys need to listen to it again, just say it, and we'll play again.
Do you want me to play the next one?
Yeah.
She's on the floor, facing
Sorry,
forward.
we have to finish
The figure has smooth curves and appears in white space over a dark floor. The size of this item is irrelevant. It is unconfined, while the imagery is incredibly clear and controlled.
The industrial material seems different in the space. It leans and is distorted by gravity. The white shapes still in the material, all different, but all consuming the background. They repeat organically, striving for order, but not quite achieving it. Punches of colour disrupt the eye, drawing attention to mismatched proportions. Straight folds punctuate curved bends. The colour inhabits the space, bold and unapologetic. 4 right angles point in different directions. 4 silver metal frames frame round spaces in the woven shiny colour. The light reflects off the curves of the bends, which are drawn down to the floor, slightly disrupting the flatness of the object. The piece is raised a foot above floor level and a foot below the ceiling. 2 colours intermingle on the surface, with one shining through the other, occupying the same space, producing a new hybrid colour.
You can play the next one then, if you're done.
The piece sits upon a tall plinth. It's made of soft material and wobbles when nudged. Within its structure sits a speaker, playing sound reminiscent in the household. The speakers can be seen through the structure, as it is only semi-opaque. Wibble wobble, wibble wobble. The piece is one vibrant colour that sunlight passes through. Its shape is commonly found within the tombs of Egypt, tall and pointed, reaching for the sky, commanding in presence. The sounds from within distorted by the agar-like substance. Wibble wobble, wibble wobble. The sounds of the piece reverberate round the room. It reminds you of home, of mother, of safety. Clean smells, fresh linen, this place where it's safe. Yet the sounds are trapped, encased within a structure with a strong, sweet scent, with links to Egyptian tombs and death and solitude, placed above other pieces in a place of importance, alone, afraid, alone but trapped. Freedom is lost and no longer safe. Wiggle wobble, wiggle wobble.
My piece is huge. Styles of silk drips over the edge, the appendages draping over the side, loom-like, but not quite. The saggy flesh glistens in the light when it hits it, melts over the lumps, drips, 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 so that the opaqueness slowly becomes transparent. You can see the skeletal structure underneath. But in other places, the lumps are so thick, they're like bricks. Bricks of fat, bricks of lard, bricks of rotting, sagging flesh. Leaning man, all over to the left, like he's lost control of his body. He can't keep himself upright due to sheer weight. All the fat, all the lard, the dripping over on the left side. He has no head, he has no arms. What he has aren't quite legs, but they're not. They're just sagging, dripping lard, fat, fat, fat.
It's far across the wall in orderly fashion in cones of form, suspended on a single nail each. Each one with combinations of colors. Some are opposite, some are complementary, but never the same spectrum or group. Combination of 2 and 3, each one with its own design. While it's built on the floor in orderly fashion, it begins to rise up into structure, resembling columns of different colors and height. Pillars supporting each column, each of a different height, they connect. Single line stopping it from falling while being suspended a foot from the floor. Geometric shapes layered on top of each other. Different contours display themselves, depending on which angle it is observed from. Nonetheless, still stays true to the 4-line formation each shape is constructed of. The whole thing is textured with layers and layers of wool, making it soft to the touch. How the sharp corners protrude and escape the wool, that has no leverage to hold on. Round, round it goes. Around the light of the wood, running corners softening their harshness, endlessly intermingling with colors, endlessly bringing out the action of the other.
Every object.
One second.
Different con- being suspended. Engine of different height. Shades of colors. Some are across the wall. It's far across the wall in orderly fashion, in columns of form, suspended on a single nail each. Each one with combinations of colors. Some are opposite, some are complementary, but never the same spectrum or group. Combination of 2 and 3, each one with its own design. while it spills on the floor in orbiting fashion, it begins to rise up into a structure, resembling columns of different colors and height. Pillars supporting each column, and shape of different height they connect. Single lines stopping it from falling while being suspended a foot from the floor. Geometric shapes layered on top of each other. Different contours display themselves, depending on which angle it is observed from. Nonetheless, still stays true to the four-line formation each shape is constructed on. The whole thing is textured with layers and layers of wool, making it soft to the touch. How the sharp corners protrude and escape the wool, that has no leverage to hold on. Round, round it goes, around the light of the wood, round its corners, softening and hardening, endlessly intermingling with colors, endlessly bringing out the action from the other.
There are three objects comprising this piece. They are placed on long metallic screws on a long wooden board and have equal space between them. Imagine grey clay being squished in your face and taking your hand's shape. Each one is different from the other, as the hand movement, pressure and gesture was different from the making of each one. Even though each piece has its own shape, none of them have a straight line. They're all covered in dark red silicone rubber. For the one on the right, a squished woven nail stayed in the grey clay, so it has 4 holes. On its back side is a clear view of the inner palm line of the clay. It is smooth and curving at the top and almost split in 2 parts on the bottom and forms a small abstract semicircle line. On its front is a smooth textured red silicone that on its back has been peeled off and sticks out within the clay underneath. More clay was used in its making, so it's more bulky, and the imprint on the hand is more obviously spotted. There was enough pressure applied on the clay, so the clay between the fingers protruding and forming lines across the piece. In contrast to the first object, there are not holes, just 4 indents. Its front side is covered with dark red silicone, and on its back, it has been finely removed and the clay underneath is being exposed. The third one is double in width from the rest and placed horizontally on 1 screw on each side. There are 2 hands used to form this clay object. The one on its upper half was made by squishing with the palm facing up, whereas the lower part was made by squishing the clay with the palm facing down. The silicone covering this piece is not being manipulated, cast, or restored, and is covered from the bottom all the way down the screws, and while it was being made, the silicone was dripping on the wooden board.
Okay, so basically these are people who are named in our poster. And this was the first one, right there to me. And you see some of the drawings to be a little bit from each other. This has factory likeness. Some years. That's mine. And you see the drawings are really different from the original artworks. And basically from your drawings, everyone has their own perception of the audio information they have.
Also,
for drawing and printing images,
Yeah.
kind of have a whole back meaning to them and stuff. So yeah, the proposal was actually applied. This one was not applicable to the project.
So our project, gonna move on.
The longevity of it.
Yes. And hopefully maybe it might continue. Maybe we'll make more publications, like different descriptions.
Different explanations,
Yes,
perceptions.
for like at least maybe 1 or 2 more rounds to see. It's a very interesting project for us. Yeah, we're very interested in that. So it's
Many people concentrate on the shade, many people on the lines, on the colors, on the shading, on the pick up on different words. It's really interesting to see how each individual has a completely different drawing. So at the end of the day, what's the original? Like when you go to a gallery, you watch an art piece, you have your own image in the end, in your head. So we play with this idea of different interpretations.
yeah. That's our lot.
Brilliant. What do people think of that process? Of doing that? What did you feel about it? What did you get from it?
Just the chance to be really expressive,
Yeah.
especially with the materials provided. It wasn't. I mean, we have some colouring pencils, but I feel a lot of it was, well, pens, so it's just go for it and do what you can with it. It doesn't feel very restrictive. Which is
So
nice.
that's interesting to point out that the choice of materials made it more playful.
Yeah.
Like if it had been watercolours,
Mm.
you might have been more restricted. Do you know what I mean? Or it was oil paints. You've got to be restricted in terms of time frame. But you know what I mean? It would be a completely different experience, no? You might be taking it more seriously as trying to produce an art object. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you lose focus and try to do it so perfect into like watercolors and consistency and stuff.
But that's not the point. You know, we're not interested.
Well, that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
So
we're
what is the
more
point? Yeah.
interested in actually how you see things and how you perceive things. Because in your head, nothing is, you know, exactly there. You don't, even if you have a line in your head, it's not a line. It's sort of you perceive it differently, and everybody will perceive that line differently. And it's just, you know, at least in my head, I see things in colors and things like that. So I don't see things as a painting. My idea is never like exact, and that's how people think. And we're more interested in that. You don't think exactly the way things come out, because you know when you make an artwork, you start out thinking it's going to be like that, and it doesn't really turn out exactly the way you were thinking. It turns out it takes its own shape and things like that. So we were more interested in seeing
The linear
how can you bring colors in, what colors you think, like how you transform the colors in your head into the colors that you actually put. Hopefully it wasn't that limited, because I brought as many colors as I possibly can.
So it's more about the process then, and like maybe getting other people to experience what it is to produce art as well. So it's in the fact that you don't do, I mean, it would be pretty poor if you did an exact translation of the image you have in your head and just put it on paper, wouldn't it? Because if you did that, it would become quite a limited version. It can't grow in itself. You don't use the materiality experimentally, do you? So was that part of it, or is it more the fact that you wanted to see how, because it's almost like Chinese whispers, isn't it? So you have the original that you then translate into audio, and then we further translate into an image. So was it to think through that kind of how we hand down information as well? Or what, was that part of it? Or was it separate?
Think about that. And also I think we felt that we wanted to make something where people could be more involved in it, instead of just reading about a repetition of an artwork. Like, people can get involved and make their own.
publication.
Yeah. So that's
The thing is, nowadays, like, the art is so much concept and so much thinking. So maybe we lost the idea of just grabbing a pen and just drawing what we hear or what we think or whatever. So
expressiveness.
Some expressiveness with what you're given.
And what do people think? Do you think that your subjectivity, so your subjective response to the audio, actually changes the images that you would produce? So do you think it would radically differ from person to person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks differently.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're sitting next to each other, you're sort of looking over and
and you have images on the screen already, so subconsciously they have what they sort of look like already. So I think I was drawing.
So you were influenced, maybe?
Yeah, because I found some of the description a bit confusing.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what to draw. And then I was just drawing something and thinking, oh, could go there.
Yeah.
That's another idea, because the previous ones, the ones I showed you on the PowerPoint, they had no clue, nothing, they had never seen any drawings or nothing, so it was kind of like just a clear mind. Whereas this one is kind of like a collective thing, so people want to see how, if they're going to be that different as these ones, because you did see some visual stimuli and you actually work each other to do it.
Yeah, and that's worth thinking through, isn't it, in terms of what that does to the project. Does that make sense? Because if you're wanting to see the kind of processual nature of things being handed on with pretty much being blindfolded to it, which is what you've done by making it the audio, then maybe a group of collectively would change that or interfere with it in some way.
Well, I think the drawings are quite different from the drawings that other people did when they had nobody. Because a lot of the times we had to replay the recording more than once or twice or 3 times. For instance, I had to play public recordings 5 times for people because it is hard to imagine, at least especially people we asked, most of them weren't artists or in the art world, didn't like, some of them were mathematicians and things, so they don't think in the same way as like we do.
So and also what we'll be influenced by is our own style, presumably, as well. Though, as artists or people interested in art, presumably we all have our own style as well that we would come at it with. Does that make sense? We've already most probably tried to assign ourselves an aesthetic of some sort, and therefore that intervenes in it, which is different to possibly other people. But also what I found, I don't know what other people found, did you find, listening to the audio, all of it depended on when you were told something? Like, because sometimes, it came last, I think, in one of the definitions, that it was so far from a ceiling and so far from the floor, and then suddenly you're like, whoa, well that's a completely different frame. So what do I do, and then what's my decision based on that?
Yeah, like in this one, that one, the description starts, and then it says no hands, someone like crossed it. And yeah, it's really fun. What you said before.
Because there's this description that crosses out what other, but if you already thought, and I think it's hard until you listen to the whole thing. Some people listen to the whole thing and then drew it.
Yeah.
And some people while they were listening would draw it, and that produced quite a different outcome. To be honest with you, like that made a lot of a difference to the drawings.
Yeah, so and presumably how often men hear it as well, because if you hear it the whole, and then you've got a picture of the whole and then hear it back, you could then maybe do a more accurate drawing, couldn't you?
Yes, so in continuation of the project, we could actually control these things.
Yeah, do you want to control them? Do you want to make it a scientific experiment?
No, it's not.
It's not a scientific experiment.
So
it's like, I guess, an artistic experiment. Isn't like to see what happens, because we're more interested in how the concept is sort of transformed through people than like exactly like I don't know, sterile conditions. This is how you have to do it. Because if this is how it was, we would make everybody probably listen to it once and then just say go and sit. You wouldn't have a choice.
Yeah.
To listen it back through.
But my thing is, if it is slightly anthropological, if it's trying to understand something about man, or the way we process information, then you most probably want it controlled. But if it's more to do with what you were saying in your press release that you sent out, that it's more to do with the original, and what we view an original artwork as being, which you haven't actually talked about yet, that would change it a bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's more about what we think an original artwork is.
Yeah, like right now we have the drawings you made, the drawings that were made before, our vinyl, our CD, our online profiles, our recording.
Yeah, so you've disseminated it as far as
which one is the original, like one original artwork produced?
Yeah.
Well, we were thinking.
Who's the author actually?
And so have you got any answers for those things?
Who is the original? Well, to be honest with you, we've been with this project for several months now. We don't particularly know what is the original in this particular project. We know what are the original art piece that we described from, but we don't consider them original artworks to our project. Because original
would be this. This is what we consider to be original from the start. Like, this is what it is. This is how the first put together by us. That's original. However, we have an idea that the original is the actual MP3 recording on the computer.
That's the artwork
original.
itself.
Yeah, or the artworks that are created by people, because all of them are originals from you. So for you, those are the originals, not the MP3s. So to be honest with you, it got to a point where we're not sure what is the original.
So it's both.
Because it is everything is in a sense the whole project is the original artwork, to be honest.
Yeah.
The whole thing is an artwork.
I think that's most probably where you're coming to, is the structure. So in a way you're curators, right? And you've curated an exhibition that has a publication form, has an online presence, and has different modes to it. But its overall thing is its structure, it's its process, and that becomes the artwork. But I think it's a good question. What do people think an original artwork is? And B, what did you think was the original in this project? So first of all, it might be helpful if we decide what original means, an original artwork is. What do people just take it to be? What do you think it is? If you had to define the term.
Maybe that you can't really define. Maybe original doesn't really exist.
I think that's a really good point. But what do people think? What do we traditionally think original meant?
Something produced, something new.
Something new and one-off.
Yeah.
Often an original. I mean, we can have original series, don't you, as in Warhol, but it's something that is limited to give it value. Yeah. So an original is often what we think is a one-off work. Yeah. So, but now with the different ways that we operate, do you think that we necessarily believe in the original? Do we believe in the artist's genius, who we used to link to the original as well? Does that make sense? Because that was a really important thing. For it to be original, it had to have some sort of kudos, didn't it? Yeah, some sort of artistic genius. Do we believe in the artistic genius? No. And that's quite interesting, because you guys don't. Is that how you can say that these are art forms as well? Yeah.
I think I definitely wrote about before how we kind of wanted to not to kind of go against the idea of artists as genius and just give it back to people.
Yeah.
In general.
But within a structure that you've created, so you could almost say that the structure is the artwork as much as it is the exhibition. So it might be that these aren't necessarily artworks. It's up to you. What do people think? Are these artworks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Okay. And why do you think they're artworks?
Because I wouldn't say it was outsider art, because we all have experience, and so it's not naive art. That it's not meticulously thought out. So I'd say that we have some knowledge of how to use the materials, of how art can be represented.
But if you look at it at very school,
Yeah.
you could, what do you say? You look at that and say that we're art students.
Yeah, well, it definitely shows a knowledge. You'd hope so.
Sorry,
but it's also there's a knowledge of formalism, isn't there, in them? Do you know what I mean? There's in that one there's a knowledge of abstract art and possibly architectural kind of style drawing. Do you know what I mean? You can see different influences in it that says that you've got a knowledge of image language. Definitely.
It's also the context.
But does that mean that they're artworks? Would you?
I would consider them artwork because, as an artist, you consider artworks like your sketches and things. You still somehow put them together, even if they're like one-off tries. They're not even finished. They're never going to be finished. They're just something I put on a paper. To me, it is still in itself a try at artwork. So to me, this is still art because art can take on any form. It doesn't have to be the traditional oil on canvas or, I don't know, marble sculpture. It doesn't have to be that because art is now much more than what it used to be. It's much bigger, the whole concept of art is.
So do you think the more unskilled drawers, do you think their works are art as well?
I would say so.
Yeah, because if you see them, some of them are really like.
And it's not even that. It's not even the skill or anything else. That's
I meant more untrained.
Yeah, I know, but it's just I see them because this is how they perceive it, and anybody in real life now can create art, and that's art to them and art to a lot of other people. If people consider something art, it is art.
And what does that do to the fact that you're all paying money to do a degree in art? Does that not undermine you doing that? Because in a sense, where the art happens now is your structure, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of collapsing art and life, but by collapsing art and life, do you get what I mean by art and life? Yeah, collapsing the boundary between skilled and untrained, I guess. You then have to, by doing that, the artwork becomes the structure in which you've done that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess
so you haven't. I'm just trying to say that it kind of like, if you endorse everything being art, where is the value of art? Does that make sense?
Well, that's a good question in general all the time.
Yeah.
But at least I also think that this stuff is art now because it is in this environment. You know what I mean? It's been
so part of it's the fact that you framed it.
Yeah. Also the fact that we brought it in. Also
so what
makes it more of an art than it used to be when I was outside. But I still would consider this as a. I mean, I would consider a 5 years old drawing in a sense art because they're a man who's a theory and they draw worse than 5 years old, but it is true and they're considered art. But it's different. Like a lot of artists, they strive to draw like kids and things like that. Like it's a sort of an innocent way of creating, and that's how you perceive it.
Yeah.
Bring it out.
People would say that they were knowledgeable and wanted to do that, and that's the concept is therefore the art. Do you get what I mean? Rather than, but it's an interesting discussion, I think, and it's interesting for you to think through in terms of where is the artwork in your, like, because you asked that question as in the original, and it would be in the structure of how you set it up.
I think because if you're in a classroom and have like a history lecture and you just draw something new here, sometimes you don't consider it being an artwork.
Yeah.
But now that we asked you to specifically listen to it and draw it, we think it's an artwork. So it depends who
sees it.
Yeah,
well, you framed it
as
art, and that's the thing that makes it art, right? You set up the conditions for it to be art. So your project does that. It does the art making, and it gives it the validity to be art. Yeah, I think that's really good. So, what do you think was successful about this project?
I think because you asked us to use filters, like if you asked us to use oil paints, like it really freed us up and just got rid of any image.
Wait, so you think it's better that we have these, or you?
Yeah, these. It kind of ignites this like nostalgia and
makes it more playful.
Yeah.
Have like sort of changing sort of like environment for it. Like say if we were all just sitting like a single desk, separated from like one another. Do you think you might get a different sort of change because also as well like as we're all in like a group together, we like can all kind of sort of dart over and see if someone's doing it and like doing something different to your own work as well.
I would say that would change it a lot, but that's not what we're striving for.
Okay.
Because the way you think is also you dart and look at what other people are doing, and that sort of influences how you think, and that's how it influences how you understand things. So in reality, we're never really alone. We're always in a collective. That's how we see and perceive things. So it would change it a lot, and I am for a fact some people drew it by themselves, so without anybody, and that produced quite a different artwork. So for instance, go back to B.
Would you choose to document that though when you add those to the online archive? Would you choose to say because these were collected and they were?
Well,
It's
some
up
of
to you,
them
I mean,
weren't
does it
collective.
matter?
Some of them were collective, some weren't. But if you see, like, for instance, this one is radically different to something like this. You know what I mean? Go one back. No. Yeah. No. I don't have them up. No, there's the one with the circle things. Yeah, just something about it. Because there's some of them that looks nothing like it. But even those were made with people, like two people together. And they made it completely radically different things. Even though they look at each other.
conditions the same then.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't.
it's not massive.
It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but there is a difference, a small difference. It really depends on the person.
Weird things do appear though. Like if you go to the slide of my salon, one person who drew it was my artwork. One person drew it and a cat appears in the drawing. Like I never said anything about a cat, but it genuinely just appears, just there. Go up.
The cat.
It's just like someone like okay, no.
Yeah, but
I did the same one. It just appeared. I was like,
This one's fun of Hello Kitty. Another thing I wanted to ask, did you think the audios were effective, or were there ones that were more effective than others in terms of translating the artwork? And did that actually matter to you? Or did you just kind of want to respond kind of expressively anyway?
I think it kind of reminded me of, because you were saying you wanted to kind of take the theory out of the work and make it more expressive. But the art recordings reminded me of when you're reading a text of theory, it makes no sense and it's really convoluted and like you have no idea what it's on about, except you've done it the other way around with like the artwork instead of the theory. So it was really pretty much guessing, I think. Like, and especially if you hadn't had a art training, you might not have understood some of the phrases that we've become used to that you use in the recordings.
Oh, that's interesting. Like what phrases? Because I didn't.
I think it was just like the way people phrase things in art. When you speak about art, I find it's very different from when you phrase it if you don't talk about art normally.
Yeah.
Like talking about geometric shapes and stuff like that, but someone just said squares everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because Kivarova has never done in her life like art. She has, but you know, she's kind of math student. So I mean, with me as yet, it's kind of confused. She just be a fat man, but
breaks of land, breaks of hands. Make it bigger.
I like
but
that.
I think this one was really effective, and even this one has so much movement and stuff. So I think even if she didn't understand, she made something completely different, but with the same it's like I think this one was mine. I think was really, really not
Some of them
similar.
were scary accurate.
Yeah.
Do you think that therefore cultural heritage, so like maybe we call it kind of cultural cachet, the culture given by your parents or by your education affects therefore what kind of images you might produce? Yeah. Yeah. And so someone's idea of like, you know, when we did the blobby person, most of us could envisage like a concrete blobby kind of mess, whether it's concrete or not, but you know what I mean, that kind of, because we've seen it in art galleries. Now, if you haven't seen that in art galleries, what your theory of art or what your image of art might be something quite different. That might not be what you would imagine as an artwork. Does that make sense? What if Rodin was your image? Then it would become quite a leap of imagination to come up with something completely. Or do you get what I mean? I don't know. Do you think that did affect, or because you're saying partly it did, and partly it didn't? Some people.
It really depends on the person. Because it's, I don't know, some people were scary accurate from description. And I feel like some of those people weren't artists. That's the whole idea. Like, people who were accurate weren't artists. People who were artists and who had any experience with art did like that. You know what I mean? They did a lot of other things. They did like drawings, lines, and all over the place, and whatever they imagined.
So we've tried to be more self-expressive,
yes,
maybe, than literal.
Yes.
Possibly.
So some people.
Well, literally.
Yeah, I had one of my friends did it. She's a receptionist in a hotel who comes from Hungary. Never done anything art-wise in her life. She didn't go to university. She just worked in a hotel, and she was actually quite abstract in what she did. She's never really drawn before. She didn't go literal. She didn't really listen. She made things quite like that big one there.
Yeah.
The pictures aren't up there, but I was quite like surprised. Like, oh, look what we take. She was quite expressive, I think, in the way that she drew.
Yeah. Why do you think you could take this somewhere else? Like, in terms of longevity of your project, you're already putting it on, like you said, an exhibition, which is great, and it's existing online. Do Do you think you could manifest it in other places? Or not? What's another way that you could imagine the project? Because what I'm interested in is that you described your own artworks. What if it was that you were describing other artworks?
Yeah, we did discuss that. We were thinking at the very beginning, should we describe our own artworks, or should we all take one artwork, maybe something quite famous, like Rodin or Warhol or something, and then describe that, but each in our own way, and see what happens with that. So that could be quite interesting to think.
We're also thinking of maybe making one artwork, all of us. So that'd be like a collaboration of all our.
And then getting other people to describe it. Because there's lots of different ways that you could play with this structure, right?
Yeah. Well, as long as we have the artwork description, then the responses from that is quite.
I mean, there already is maybe describing what other people drew. So it's like it is.
Well, it could be that you then end up describing someone's, say, that big piece there, you end up describing that, and then it carries on it. And just see how far it goes.
It's never ending.
Well, unless it ends up with a blank page or someone's just in the end going, there's no more to do. But I doubt it. It's that idea that you can't dematerialise things. But it could keep going. Is there any other projects that you know of that this kind of fits in with? Or anyone else knows of that this might fit in with? Did you look any of this up? And you were...
Not projects like this. Most of the things we looked at things like Aspen Magazine, the way that they format and have the different sort of formats of artwork, pieces and paper. And it's also an idea of archiving artworks as well as having this response experiment. So for that, we looked at audio arts, which is fascinating. If anyone goes to Tate website and looks up audio arts, it's brilliant. It's just really relaxed, informal discussions and interviews with famous artists, and that in itself, the description and the conversation of the artworks, and because you can't see it, because you've been making art for 20, 30 years, when artists are describing their own works for the listener, it's quite an interesting way of archiving stuff, which is similar to what we've done with our own.
And what do you guys experience? When you have to describe your work, is it easy to describe your own work or someone else's? Or if you have to describe what you're doing to someone, do you find it easy to describe what your friend's doing at the moment or what you're doing?
I think I find it easy to describe someone else's work in my work.
And I think that's common. I don't know what other people think. Sometimes because you're so close to your own work, it's harder to describe it because it's quite complexly interwoven. Does that make sense? And to describe something literally, it sometimes is easier to take someone else as an example. Why do you find that?
I don't know, because I feel like, because you're trying to, like in my work, I'm trying to deal with stuff that I don't always necessarily completely understand. So I'm trying to get the idea across and people are like, okay. Whereas if I just like talk about what I know of someone else's work, then I guess I'm less responsible. Like if I'm trying to get my idea across, and there's always that you want your idea to come across as well as possible, because you should know it well enough. But then
so that could have influenced, and it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing to think about. Because did you listen, say, to audio guides, like go around the tape with audio guides for blind people? Because that might be another thing to think about. How have those things been described, those artworks been described, A, for viewing people, and B, for blind people, and think about how that then could affect the details that you include. Or, because it's quite interesting to think what you've included or not in your audio, and how that changes the kind of parameters of the project.
And the University of Reading was doing with British Museum a project called Sensory Objects. And they were taking people with disabilities. I went to the presentation, it was really exciting how people with disabilities actually described the museum and the artwork with totally different words like smells and feelings. And they didn't really care about the artwork, but anything else but the artwork. The museums was really exciting. And they made their own like sensory object boxes.
Yeah.
Where they collected the smells they reminded of, and like the drone, and they recorded their self saying something they remind of. Like one girl saw an Egyptian or something, like a boat in the British Museum or something, and she thought of her mom. So immediately she said she thought the object was about her mom. So that's how her sensory box ended up being completely different. It's kind of similar, but like.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, would you ever think of doing something with touch then? Instead of the audio, like, to me, I'm just interested to know whether it matters what processes you put in, or whether it's just the overarching process that's important, which is to do with, what is that to do with? To do with perception? And transference of meaning? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're very interested in more of a perception of how people perceive
individuality, how everyone else.
How people perceive audio. Well, we only sort of stopped in audio because we were also looking at binary sounds and all that sort of things. We had an idea of putting binary in there. So like instead of description, actually transferring description to binary and letting people listen to it, which would seriously just be noises.
Yeah.
But to some people, it might mean something else, depending on the information. The noises, it might invoke some kind of different picture.
Yeah, well, it depends whether actually, because if you did noise and someone does an abstract response, did it matter that it looked completely different to the beginning? If the process is what's important and when you think what you think the original is, so does it matter how accurate the translation is? What I'm saying. At each stage, if for you it's more about challenging where the original is. So this is kind of an enveloping process where each thing is an original in its own right.
Yeah.
It's one but so is your project, which endorses that originality.
Yeah, we were never really mattered how it came out. It never really seemed to like play that big of an important role. Like it never like, oh no, it didn't come out of we have to scrap the whole project. No. That wasn't the idea. The idea was to see and observe that what already what was created, what exists, and the process of how it was created and how people sort of because like we have you guys on film when you were drawing, so we will look at people like some people confused, some people have been enraged when they're listening to our recordings. Like, some people like, what the hell are they describing? And they leave the room and come back to it and say, okay, fine. Like, yes, I had a friend. Yeah, my friend was like, I don't know what she's describing. I'm done. And she would leave and then like, it's like, okay, fine, I'm sorry, come back. And then drew it. I'm like, okay. Well, so you did have an idea of what to describe. Yeah. Some people were like mellow, didn't really. Some people were confused completely. Some people were angry, panicked. Yeah, it really depends. Like it was really interesting to see how people would how people drew and how people sort of went through this process of taking an idea out of their head and putting it on paper. Especially like people who don't do it all the time. I have a friend who doodles, but she was enraged when she had to draw something up. She was like, really? Why?
So you can be quite frustrated about someone else's verbalization of what an image looks like.
Yeah, because I feel like she sort of wanted to do it exactly like literal, but then I was like, that's not the point. Do how you see it. Okay. Yeah, because that's when you're angry.
Yeah.
Which is quite an interesting thing to see.
It is quite interesting. Did you look at any of the publications that involved sound as you did this project?
Well, mostly Aspen and just binary and the publications. Because majority of them, there's not that.
And did many of them come with the disc?
Well, just sort of something we chose to do. We sort of made it a small version, like a mini version you could take with you.
Yeah.
To the original. That was like, this is like an archive pretty much of what is happening. So this is something like a snippet of what you can see what it was the project about. So it's
so you see it as kind of an archive, but an organic archive, an archive that keeps on growing.
Yes.
So the projects like that. So have you looked at any sort of online archives? Because it might be worth looking into online archives and how people display theirs. Because how did you choose to display your archive?
Well, archive is just go to the Facebook page.
As a normal creation.
Yeah, just the actual Facebook. Well, I looked at some of the actual like theater archive. I don't know, that's something that I looked at, and how they chose the majority of the theater archives. They just archive just pictures of like costumes, sometimes sounds, and then like maybe a little clip. So you don't get a whole picture, but that's still an archive of what actually happened. So this is in a sense also like a little snippet of what was looked at.
So this is how, there's a curator called Dane Sutherland who curates noise, and he might be worth looking into just in terms of this project, because if you've ever wanted to take him to noise that, you know, going into binary, he's got an interesting political position on noise, and that's why he uses it.
Well, I think our Facebook page is pretty much an archive of even the process, like, if you go
So
to
zeros and ones, that's what
yeah, that's that, but I'm assuming
Well, you ever heard of Sadie Plant? Sadie Plant wrote a book called Zeros and Ones, and it's about the revolutionary power of zeros and ones throughout history.
You know, it's fine. But basically, the way our Facebook page works is the actual recording so that anybody can try it themselves.
Have any of you visited the Facebook page? How did you find it?
Easy to use.
Yeah? Good. That's important, isn't it? Did you feel like it structured your experience of it? Did you feel like it had been consciously curated? Or did you feel it was like more organic? What did you... If you show it to us now, people will know.
Well, basically how it goes is the actual recording, and then it goes at some of the pictures that been created. So like an image. And before that, what we started out was actually showing the actual work, then the process of, you know, like printing
Well,
it
that's
out.
an interesting question, isn't it? On the website, how do people experience it? Do you know what I mean? Because we experienced it audio, this, then we saw the image, right? The original image, the one that you created to describe it. Yeah, this original thing is difficult to, but yeah, we use it like that at the moment. I'm saying original because it's a problematic term, but yeah, we'll just use it for this as in the first one, the primary image. And so when you put it on the website, do you want them to trace it back? So they see this, then they hear the audio, and then they see the primary work. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It might be worth thinking about.
But we haven't
What
put up
we've
the
done.
primary work yet, because we're still seeing what people will respond with.
So you're wanting people to submit stuff?
Still,
To
yeah.
Facebook?
People still submit stuff.
To your Facebook? Do they have their own images on that?
They
Or
can, if they want to. But pretty much, right now it's working more like we ask them and they put it in. Because
so you're administrators, presumably.
Yeah.
So not anyone can.
Well, no, anybody can post a comment and things like that. That is allowed.
They can
You
still
post
post
pictures. So I put it onto like so people can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
If you wish to, it's just, you know, I sort of structured it in a way that the option of the audio is first, and then sort of it's your choice if you want to see and be influenced by stuff that was already created.
Okay.
And then, if you wish, you can
So what's the first thing you see?
It's the actual recording.
So you can avoid seeing any of the images, and you can play that. Because what do you think of that? What do you think of that structure? How would you have done it?
Because you're working with sound and you're playing the sound from the old-fashioned, I don't know what, but that has a certain layer of information to it, like vintage and old-fashioned. If you put the original recording on there, because did you play it out of that or?
No. That's the same thing. That's the actual MP3 player, but this is I believe this is actually the original.
When you came in, this was playing.
Yeah, when you came in, that was
That's a
playing.
good question though. So you had does a record come out with that bigger one?
Yeah, the record inside.
Yeah,
It was playing. The first thing when you came in, that was what I was playing was the actual original.
I think that was your question, wasn't it?
Yeah, because like you have a really interesting potential here working with sound because you can manipulate that sound to whatever pitch or whatever sound. So like if you played it off an old-fashioned thing, then you might get different results here because it has a certain texture to it.
Well, and that's interesting. Yeah. So the medium, the medium of your recording. So whether you hear it on that, because it is a different sound. It's tinnier, right? Like if I listen to it on my phone, it's going to be more tinny. And then if you listen on that, it is going to be older and maybe have a bit more nostalgia attached to it. And then the disc is going to be somewhere in between, right? So I think maybe there's something in what she's saying. Like you can actually have that up. There's different qualities to sound when it's played. on these different materials, and you could like experiment with that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if you change the pitch even and it was slightly shrill, then it might like influence the drawing.
Yeah, so with the actual nature of sound, because you focused on the description, but I think your question is the nature of sound and the materiality of that.
Fair to you.
How that might change it as well. Which is, it's up to you whether you want to look into it, but it's another thing that you could look into. Would that interest you, Sabrina?
Manipulating sound. The thing is, yeah, we were interested in that at the beginning, with the biome and everything, because we also were really interested in idea of different description and different tones and different emotional states. So like, for instance, we had, and at the beginning we were planning to make the description, like somebody would be just like, upset when it was described. And suddenly it would become mellow. And in a sense, this actually happened. In a sense, like Mia is very mellow. And then some of them are very like quick and fast way of describing it, and some of them are not. So we were interested in like an emotional thing. How would that, in a sense of like what you perceive,
or what you think it can emotionally convey, might be something completely different. But did you look into like any spoken word artists or like concrete poets? Because if you look some up, it might be quite interesting. Because again, they would have a different way of expressing through language an object or an experience. So some might repeat a word, or stutter, or break a word up to emphasise it. And again, that's another element of communicating something like that's treating, well, their whole idea is they treat words as objects. So the words would translate the object in their own objectivity rather than through description.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like onomatopoeia in English. Yeah? So onomatopoeia, crash, it sounds like it. And that could be end up influencing your choice of words. So it might be worth looking into them and thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because that would actually, that would make highlight the fact that that's an original even more, wouldn't it? Does that make sense? Because it's an original even more because the words in themselves take on the presence of an artwork.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So that could highlight it even more. And then the final piece, I guess maybe the final piece, if you wanted to, like you've actually said that you don't, you think that sketches and all different forms are artwork. So you've got that argument, but you could say that you actually set them up with canvases or clay or with actual proper artistic equipment.
Yeah.
And then they rebuild based on those sounds, and again that would be an original object. But it's just different. I mean, that would be more expensive, so you'd want funding. That last one. But like, yeah, I mean, you could, do you know what I mean? You could play with it, play with our notions of originality.
Yeah, it would definitely be quite an interesting avenue to go to sort of concrete poetry and sound art. So rather than the description being an archive, it would be an artwork in itself. So the whole thing, the structure is an artwork. Personally, I don't view the description as an artwork. I view that as an archive.
That's interesting. Okay.
The drawings created from the response, the original, and the whole thing, I view as an artwork, not the description.
Okay. So what do people think of that? Did you think the description? Because I thought the description was perhaps the most artistic in it.
Yeah.
So I think that created the thing, you know, and that was the thing we had to respond to. What do other people think? It's just interesting that different people might see the artwork in different places. Did you think the audio was the least artistic aspect of it?
It's how the artist views it, because she did the description, maybe it undermines it. Whereas someone has the description will say, oh yes, interesting, that's an artwork, that's cool, and I like the word you, blah blah. She might be, oh no, it's nothing, I described it, I don't like it. So maybe it's
I think that's highlighting the fact that, maybe, if you're treating it as if it's merely a description and not an artwork in itself, at that stage, it would change your treatment of it, wouldn't it? Like if you were treating it as an artwork, you might have been as expressive as we've been with this. So you might have been like really abstract in your description of it, which would then completely distort the primary art object.
My description was relatively abstract. And it was quite low and trig. very hard not to give a lot away, but that was just, I don't know, when I was doing it, I was just like, ugh, because I'd done it, like I'd actually made it weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and it had been dismantled and stuff, and I was like, redoing it again.
Yeah.
And it just didn't feel like an artwork. For me personally, it just felt like this is like writing an essay about it.
That's interesting. Okay.
Like,
But it might be
reflective
interesting for you
statement.
guys to think about that. I also wondered, what would you do if it was an exhibition in a white cube? So you've disseminated it this way, I'm not saying that you ever have to, but how do you think you'd present it?
And this
If it was in a gallery?
This weekend, that's what we're thinking, like how we're going to present it this weekend. Because
Are you doing
We're
it?
not showing the original.
Are you with other artists in this exhibition? Okay.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
we got the corner for ourselves and like.
So do you think you're going to present it as?
We are going to present, as far as we know, because we decided, we're going to present the minion, the actual things, and then because it is being distributed in after the exhibition is going to be distributed in like pizza boxes, so we'll have the CDs inside of the pizza boxes. I don't. It's not our idea, so, and then it's the creator's idea.
Yeah, it'd be quite hard to make it as playful as this.
Yeah.
Because we'll have a poster with some of the response frames and this. We'll have a plinth with vinyl on it.
So you've been restricted by the curator.
Yeah, and we've got a drawing plinth.
Yeah.
So we don't have the amount of space that we have here.
So we only have
So you still want it to be an action project?
Yeah.
So even when it's in an exhibition, it's not going to be an exhibition of, it would still involve a live aspect?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're going to have a CD player with a headphone, so you can sit down and draw. So yeah, it would be different from this environment because it would be one-on-one. You're
In limited space.
In limited space. However, it's in a sense still sort of keeps it the idea of you being in the process of.
So, do you ever see this as coming to a kind of conclusion? And if so, if it came to a conclusion, how would you then curate it? You're hoping it just keep going.
I was hoping of maybe doing several different archives. So like maybe a couple more vinyls and then maybe or something, depending on what we decide, if it's going to be physical or film or something. So like different archives, maybe to a point when it gets like, I don't know, just people won't be more interested in it anymore, so like we bug everybody to the point that nobody wants to do it anymore. So I feel like that would be kind of net. I mean, I can always go somewhere else, but I feel like maybe in a way that would be like, it's
Yeah, you might have several different strands of it that play with different, use similar structure but play with different elements.
There's not ever like an end to something. Things can change, and it always takes an artwork to a different direction. I believe. So, and I think each one of us has a different image in their head how they actually present the final. Like if we go to some of the materials, each one of us might have in their head different gallery setting or different way. It's a far thing now, not like the materials.
Yeah.
And as you said before, we did look into like instruction artists.
Yes.
Like,
Because I was going to say,
I think it was the Washington.
Well, we looked at
Art
Soderwings because a lot of his artwork are description based.
Yeah, how to create your exhibition and things like that.
Yeah.
Non-Photoshop did this.
And then like.
Well, she actually curated a whole exhibition, didn't she, based on instructions given by artists. And then she put things up saying couldn't fully do to artistic requirements. This bit didn't work, and it was all about success and failure as well.
Photoshop made them.
So like that was
Each one
like
did a Photoshop image of the same instructions.
And did you look at why they did it? Why they did their instructions?
It was the same thing. They wanted to see how other participators would have different outcomes because they were sending out this task, minimum task, for like 20 artists with instructions. You were supposed to do your own, at your own time, and then post the picture online. You could see other pictures, but yeah. So it was the same kind of thing, but more like curated, and it was like cooking and throwing a party and drawing. Yeah, like
Would you do cooking as a response to your art? Like,
well, we
invite people in to look at your art object and go, well, I really feel like it's most probably banana pancake in the way that it comes across to me, and then people consume it, and then that's the end of the part. No? That means
No, we haven't thought about
Is that an interrelational aesthetic?
That's actual. The website they have.
Yeah.
And mainly like it's only reading the physical descriptions of the objects, and then many people try to draw them differently.
When, out of you guys, do you feel like it's confirmed what you think about people's perception and the way that they would listen to audio and create an image? Or has it gone against what you think would happen? How much variety did you think there would be between artwork and response to audio?
I think it's confirmed if I think you would assume that everyone would take responses, especially because they deliberately wanted to make it quite ambiguous anyway.
Yeah, because they obscure it. Certainly. Yeah, what do other people think? Where do you think the agency lies? Do you think that the agency sort of happened in the original artwork and that's influenced everything that's happened, or the agency lies in the audio and that's influenced the most what's happened, or do you feel the agency is actually in the end product of what you did? Did you feel you had a limited agency or quite a free agency? Do you get what I mean? Where do you think most power in the process came from? What had the most influence? Which stage of it?
I think maybe the audio, because there are so many different ways that you could do it, where you could use other people, where you could talk about it literally as what you see, what you feel, what you hear, what other people, or like talk about the feelings it makes you feel. So I feel like there were a lot of options that you could do in the actual audio. And then when you're drawing, like it does depend on each person, but also you have a limited time where you're trying to get together what people are saying. So you're catching bits that stand out to you, but I feel like there's a lot more.
So the pivotal moment, the moment with the most authorship and perhaps the most agency is the audio. What do other people think? Do you agree? Yeah.
I think time had a really important part in it.
Yeah.
Because we said people could listen to it lots and leave the room and then go back and listen to it again. We were doing it in maybe like 2 or 1.5 minutes, and it would really change it. And if we had a chance to listen to it over and over and understand what we were listening to.
So ask if you want to listen to it back. It was really your choice.
Did anyone choose not to respond to the audio? Did anyone just thought, I'm just going to freestyle this one?
I think the descriptions were quite quick, so you could only draw one thing and then listen to it. So it wasn't really instruction. It was just, I got the freestyle, so I'm not the next description, the next part. The next part. That's what I did.
So each moment kind of made it more abstract into each level of the process. But I still think, well, you were kind of tied, your description was tied to the art object, wasn't it? But in a sense, you could have been the most experimental. That stage can perhaps be the most experimental in its distortion, because it's the stage that has the most time, like they say. And it can act like a complete block to the artwork if it wanted to. So it's kind of interesting whether how much meaning you choose to pass on about the art object. Do you know what I mean? How much you want to preserve your art object and what you talk about, because you might find it quite different if you started describing her artwork. You might be far more playful than with your own, or you might be far more playful with your own.
Give me an idea, like if I was sitting here and people came up to me and asked questions about my artwork and I'm replying.
Yeah.
It depends also about the initiative. Like now we're forced to listen to the audio and listen to everything. So if they have the kind of if they had their choice of having many details or none.
Yeah.
You create different things as well. Can I say?
Yeah. How much detail
How much
should
you
you
care
give?
to ask about stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that you would have liked done differently in the process? What did you get from it? Do you think it was successful in questioning where the original artwork lay? Where do you see the artwork? So you can answer any of those questions. But where do you see the artwork in this practice? And do you think it's successful in questioning where the original artwork lies? Because that's what you say you were presented, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I think the whole thing from start to finish is artwork. I don't think there's a specific point where it becomes art.
so the whole process is art.
Yeah.
Okay. So the concept of the project and the staging of it is the artwork, this kind of structure.
Yeah. Everything from start to finish.
Yeah. And so would you call this a group of artists or a group of curators?
That's a good question. They could be both. Yeah. I don't see why it's not possible for them to both.
Yeah, because we start to see loads of artists that use other artists or other people as their artwork, haven't we? And curators do that as well. So we're seeing a real blurring of practices anyway.
Curators are artists because they create settings and create environment.
They curate stagings, yeah. But sometimes, I mean, I'm an artist curator, but sometimes curators stage very boring environments. So it's you know, and some curators should be more artistic, I think, but that's my personal opinion. So, but I think artists as curators can be more expressive than traditional curators, because if you're an artist curator or an artist who curates, then you're not restricted to having to represent someone absolutely as just them. Does that make sense? Like if I was a curator in Tate and I came up and I asked to present your practice, you wouldn't think that I'm going to put it in a shed in the middle of the turbine hole and light it in all sorts of different ways, are you? You'd be pretty cross with me if I did that, because you believe that your work has a certain autonomy in its own way that it should be staged, right? So, but an artist who curates, if they approached you, might have a conversation and say, can we do something a bit more interesting with it? Do you get what I mean? So it gives a bit more freedom to these structures. So overall, where do you think we are?
I think I've learned everything about this.
Yeah.
It's a process and artwork and
so the structure is the artwork.
Yeah. Because I don't see something the original as an artwork.
Yeah.
I see things as archives of an artwork, because it's a sense of the events that happen, you know, like actually asking people to do it in their own time, things like that. In a sense, that is a part of an artwork. Like I see myself as like this is a part of an artwork. Like all this is just an archive, you know, something that is left. In a sense, it's like a performance. It's like, I guess.
So you don't see that as the art?
No, I see that as an archive. This is something that is left.
What do the rest of you think? So that's, I think that's going to leave you guys with something to talk about amongst yourselves. But that's really good. Thank you very much. I feel like giving you a clap, or do we clap? Very good. Well done. Okay, I think that's it for today. Unless anyone's got any other questions. Thank you for that. The thing is,
obsolete, I guess.
Yeah, because these
And we
are.
have 3 CDs.
Yay! You wish to keep them. If you don't have to.
If you don't,
Go find me high. Okay, can you guys have me take the drawings and I'll like print them? Like that?
Yeah.
I'll like print them.
Photograph and then carry on doing.
I'll like print them. I'll take them home and I'll actually take them around. And then I'll put them up. And I'll send you guys the PDF. Mine sort of like died. It has like a span of 20 minutes.
Or at least make one out.
Do we take the chairs back?
You probably will.
If people can help with the chairs back, just pile them up, that would be really helpful.
That's okay.